This is why, after de-risking through diplomacy, the second strand of our future China strategy must be economic de-risking.
After the President of the European Commission gave that speech in March, the EU confirmed its de-risking strategy. But how will the European Union implement it when it is heavily dependent on imports from China? What does de-risking as an economic strategy mean, and what does it imply for Europe and its industries? Is it the right approach to create a more stable and resilient economic environment? To find out, I am meeting with experts and technology companies in France. In Paris, John Seaman from the French Institute of International Relations reminds us of current geopolitical instability.
As we move forward with these broad structural transformations, particularly the transition to a net zero society and a digital society, we're finding that there are increasing sources of dependence on countries which are increasingly willing to use those dependencies as sources of leverage in a more contentious or conflictual global environment. So as we move forward with the energy transition into electric vehicles, into solar power and renewable energy, we find that many of our supply chains are actually dependent on one source, and particularly on China.
The European Union is heavily dependent on other countries for critical raw materials, which are used to produce phones, electric vehicles or semiconductors. For instance, China supplies Europe 100% of its heavy rare earth element needs. Turkey supplies 98% of its boron needs, and South Africa 71% of its platinum needs.
The question now is, how do you mitigate the risks relative to those dependencies? How do you negotiate with China to try to make it so that China won't use its sources of leverage to the detriment of Europe's own interests?
What is Europe's strategy for strengthening economic security? Here's our crash course. Europe's plan for de-risking the economy from China, Russia and other countries is based on 4 pillars. Number 1, to make industry more competitive and resilient. It means boosting digital, green and health technologies and diversifying its supply of important rare earths and metals. The second pillar is to make better use of existing trade rules. Europe wants to avoid markets being distorted by unfair competition and to reduce concerns about security around technologies like 5G. The third pillar is to defend critical sectors like quantum computing, robotics or AI. The EU wants to make sure its expertise isn't used to boost the military or intelligence capacities of its rivals. The fourth pillar is to make the most of free trade deals with countries like Australia, Mexico and Chile. The aim is to diversify supply chains and trade. Do these ambitions resonate with industrial players? Let's head to Lyon to meet Émilie Jovillet from the Yall Group, a consulting firm that works with the global semiconductor industry at the heart of global economic challenges.
Many of our clients are actually looking to regain control, particularly over packaging, which predominantly comes from China and Taiwan. They're seeking to relocate to Southeast Asia, for example. It should be noted that the semiconductor industry, which is worth 534 billion euros, is closely scrutinized by governments who are doing everything possible to maintain their position in this race for technology as well as revenue.
Therefore, the EU has launched the European Chips Act with the aim to increase production capacity of chips to 20% of the global market's needs by 2030.
We cannot unravel supply chains that are complex and where the component cost is also very important. The effort made by the European Union to invest 43 billion euros is quite significant. It will not be enough to achieve complete autonomy in semiconductors, but it's already a first step towards mastering or remastering this industry.
France, with its reindustrialization strategy, is rebuilding supply chains, particularly for semiconductors and batteries. At the heart of Grenoble's industrial territory lies one of France's CEA sites, a government-funded technological research organisation which carries out innovation projects throughout the industrial value chain. The World Bank says the demand for critical raw materials is expected to increase by 500% by 2050 due to the acceleration of the green transition. These materials are at the core of tomorrow's industries, such as electric vehicles, as expert Simon Perrault explains.
If France and Europe do not control the industrial value chain for batteries, then they will not control their future energy systems. Currently, China holds more than half of the production capacities across different segments of the value chain. There is fierce competition in this field, so it is important to invest and continue research and development to support this entire industrial ecosystem. For example, by extending the autonomy of electric vehicles, using fewer critical materials and batteries, and developing battery recycling processes to recover more metals. And all of this at a lower cost.
Making batteries with fewer critical materials is the goal of startup All Energy, based near Paris. They develop lithium iron phosphate batteries without cobalt or manganese for massive renewable energy storage or to power data centres.
We choose to use materials that can be found almost everywhere on the planet and can be easily recycled. And that will allow us to manufacture batteries that have a lifespan at least 4 times longer than conventional lithium batteries, and above all, are very responsive to digital optimization.
Less powerful but more environmentally friendly, these batteries are adaptable thanks to artificial intelligence. They cost 20% more than the ones imported from China. To stand out in the highly competitive LFP battery market, it is necessary to produce a large quantity and quickly.
The battery market, the industrialisation of batteries, is a global race. And so we are engaged in this race. A race for investment, a race for technological breakthroughs, to stand out and be sovereign in our technological developments.
All Energies hopes to open its first gigafactory by 2026. Diversifying the production chain produced in Europe while continuing the digital and green transition, John Seaman reminds us that this strategy comes at a cost.
It's certainly possible to diversify supply chains, including by setting up production here in Europe. There are mines that are possible here in Europe, in Sweden, for instance, but all of this takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of investment, and it takes a lot of time. So there's a very long supply chain that you have to try to rebuild, and necessarily that's going to translate into to higher prices and higher inflation, because it costs more money to do that here in Europe than it does to do it somewhere else, particularly in China.
Thank you.